Hi there. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Helen Cole, and I am the founder of the Gene Collective. The Gene Collective is a local Sarnia Lambton initiative developed by a group of women who bring their own unique skills and experience to the collective. Our hope is to inspire and educate women to become more active in local politics. I'm pleased to introduce Marika Sylvain Groendyk this evening. Marika is the principal and founder of Bluepoint Public Relations. She is a passionate communicator and storyteller who loves helping individuals, businesses, and organizations to build, promote, and grow their brands in meaningful ways. She specializes in crisis communications and is an expert in trauma-informed communication skills. She developed those skills during a lengthy career in social work. She has a special passion for politics and was an active union member before she left her job to focus on public relations full-time. She was elected OPSU CEFPO Region 1 Provincial Francophone Committee Representative in 2019 and as the Vice President of the committee that same year. When Marika is not busy researching and creating public relations strategy, wordsmithing communications, or helping individuals, businesses, and organizations through crisis, she enjoys spending time searching for beach glass, playing with her boys and her bulldog, as well as gardening. Welcome, Marika, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge with us.
Thanks so much, Helen, for that nice intro. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to go into sort of two sections today. We're going to focus mainly, or the largest sort of focus will be on developing your communication strategy, because that's what will connect you with voters and the public in general. And then we'll talk a little bit about media relations and kind of the do's and don'ts of that. And I'm going to give you some examples as well. So we'll get right into it. And again, bear with me. Hopefully this technology will work for us. I always start every presentation. If you've ever been to my presentations, you know I always start with a quote. And I love this one when we're talking about communication. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So that is always something to be mindful of, is that you may think you are communicating, but you may not actually be telling anybody anything. So it's just something to be mindful of. And that's why planning is so important. I am a communication specialist, so planning is a big part of what I do. And that's what we're talking about tonight, which is great. So step one, so you should have a platform. We did a number of sessions ago about how to develop your political platform. But if you don't have a platform and you've sort of decided you're running or you want to start communicating with the public and you don't have a platform yet, you should at least have a basic idea of what your goals are going to be when you're in office, or at least sort of the overarching areas you're going to want to work on. Because without any of that, you don't have anything to communicate to people. You can tell them who you are and what you're about, sort of the who I am piece. But they need to know what your interests are, so that when it comes time to start a campaign or it comes time to vote for you, they understand what you're about, right? So that's the step. Step one is have that in place. Oh, that's in the wrong spot. That should have been before the last slide. Mistake number one. Step two. The research phase. Okay, so this, I cannot stress enough how important research is. Any good communications person, any good person helping you with your communications will absolutely stress the importance of research. I love data. Data informs everything we do. Laura probably will agree with me on how important data is, because she does a lot of that. It's her life. Yeah, there's the thumbs up. So number one, determine who your stakeholders are. So when we're talking about communications plans, we talk about stakeholders in terms of publics. So you don't just have the public in general, you have multiple publics. So first you want to think about who they are. So you're not just thinking about all of the publics, but who are the ones you need to communicate with the most. So think of who are the people most likely to vote for you. You know, for me, I'm a young woman. I'm really passionate about equality. I do a lot of women's rights, feminism stuff. I doubt that the elderly population are my key stakeholders, right? Probably not the publics that I'm going to, you know, focus all my research on, because I already know I'm probably not going to win their vote, right? So look at all of the stakeholder groups in your area and kind of do your research, narrow down who are the groups most likely to vote for me, who are the ones that I need to communicate with in this campaign, in this communication plan, and then look at where do they live? What sections of the community are they located in? I know in Sarnia-Lambton, we're not separated by district. In other jurisdictions, obviously, they have municipal government is split into district elections. That's not the case here. So you can kind of look at all of Sarnia, like City of Sarnia, all of Plimpton, Wyoming, and that kind of thing. And take a look at, you know, where within the city are your publics specifically. What are their ages? What are their likes and dislikes? You know, what kind of floats their boat? What are things that they absolutely don't like? And you can look at it in terms of just general likes and dislikes, or specific to city government, or things in general, like, do they like parks? Do they like clean streets? What are they passionate about when it comes to government as well? You can look at all of those things. What communication channels are they using the most? This is vital and absolutely necessary. You absolutely want to go into this when you're putting together a communication plan. The research on this is really important. There's always primary and secondary channels that they're using. So obviously the pandemic changed a lot of that. So people went online a lot more than they did before. You saw a lot of small newspapers kind of go under or not be as utilized as they were before. And find out exactly, you know, what channels are these folks using. If you're thinking you might need to advertise on TikTok, if that's a channel you want, probably it's not. Because unless you've got voters between 18 and 24 that are going to be voting for you, it's probably unlikely that that's going to be a source that you're going to need to use, right? Facebook, you've got actually a large component of boomers are using Facebook nowadays. Research does show that. So there's a lot of data online that you can access that tells you what age groups are using what communications channels. And I want to also stress to not overlook traditional communication channels. I know there's obviously a really big focus on digital, but people do still listen to the radio, people do still read the paper. So do your due diligence and pay attention to those channels as well when you're doing your research. And then also, what content are they most likely to respond to? And this can sometimes be universal. So if you're looking at digital, we know that people respond to visuals. We know that people respond to videos. Like if you're scrolling through Facebook, people stop when they see a short video. If it's too long, they keep scrolling because it's annoying. People respond to a short, even if it's a short GIF, they'll stop on that briefly and are more likely to read a brief caption above it. Again, if it's too long, if they have to keep seeing the see more and the written part is too long, they're not going to want to read that, that kind of thing. Look at factors impacting your stakeholders. So that's more on sort of the government level. So the things in your community that are impacting those publics. So what's going on in your local government and how do those particular stakeholders feel about it? And you could do that through polling. There may already be data out there that speaks to that. You could do that by, you know, there may be already articles that your local newspapers have written about it. For example, the homelessness issue in our community. There's been a lot of articles written about how community folks feel about shelters popping up in their neighborhoods and things like that. So just, you know, there are ways of accessing that data. Here, just one of the kids left the dog in the basement. I'm just going to go let him into my office 1 minute. He's barking. Be quiet. next, analyze the situation. So based on all of the research you've done, you can write out some opportunities. So look at all of that research and figure out your opportunities. So if you kind of know what you're thinking, you've already got sort of that plank, you've got your own platform together, look at those stakeholder groups, look at those publics and figure out, okay, what opportunities do I have here based on this research, and write some of those out. And next, identify some potential difficulties with that research. You know, are there certain stakeholders that may respond poorly to some of your ideas in your platform based on your research? That kind of thing. And then just write out one quick statement. And sometimes it's hard to keep it to a sentence. That's just a guide. Obviously, you don't have to write just one sentence, but just if you could kind of keep it succinct, but just one sentence that touches on your sort of core problem and then an opportunity, communicating with your stakeholders and the consequence if your goals aren't realized. So one good place, just to let everybody know, and I don't have the website written out here, so we can email it to you after the fact, but the Sarnia-Lambton Economic Partnership actually produces data yearly, and it's a great place to just look at demographic information about the community. So that's one place you can go to look. I actually use it a lot for communication plans when I'm looking at stakeholder research. So I'm curious if anyone has a thought about an opportunity or potential difficulty that you might identify in research, just in a general sense, if anyone has any thoughts about that. Seth.
So Marika, you've already mentioned one when you were talking about the homeless situation.
Yeah.
I think there are a number of others, depending on which community you are in, that may be issues that perhaps people hadn't thought of. And I see that Stephanie raised her hand.
Yeah. Yeah, Stephanie, what thoughts do you have on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes I find when you're searching data, it can only be as complete as those who are participating. So if there's a particular demographic that doesn't necessarily get involved, you may not get adequate data. And even as Helen brought up with the homeless, there's a lot of individuals who are homeless that also roll into a whole lot of other, say, social services that require their input, but there's no way for them to get access to providing that information. So I find when the data is only as good as those who are seeking it or collecting it. That's what I've noticed.
Yes, that's also very true. Ronnie.
And I think another problem might be is that the data is not always relevant, right? Mm-hmm. Coming out of COVID, since we've had some really good data collection, we've had this entire pandemic. And I mean, even if we can look at homelessness, but then when I consider we're in a bit of a housing crisis, mm-hmm. which is going to lead to more homelessness. And normally when we look at homelessness, we often pair that with, addiction and mental health. But the reality is now we have families who can't afford affordable housing because, I don't know, economy's gone crazy and a one-bedroom apartment's $1,500. And it's not consistent with how much money people are earning. So it's snowballing into a whole nother thing. And we don't really have data to represent the current housing crisis because it's so new.
Right. For this scenario, though, I want everybody to kind of put their communications hats on. So think about what opportunities you have to communicate with folks about those topics. Sorry, I don't know why the dog is barking. I'm just going to mute myself and go lock him upstairs. Just give me 1 minute. I'm so sorry about this interruption. Well,
So that's some great comments about, one, the quality of data and the fact that it is fairly new in some cases. So I think that's probably something we need to keep in mind when we're collecting our information, wouldn't you say?
She just stepped out for a pup.
Yeah. I know. There she is.
Sorry. You would think that people could figure out by now that he cannot be in the basement while I'm on a meeting. Yeah, so with the communication hat on, it's hard not to look at the big picture of all of the other ins and outs, but if we're just looking at communications, think about what opportunities you have to communicate with your stakeholders about certain things, but also the difficulties. So say you decide, or part of your platform is affordable housing. So you want to communicate the opportunities because there's a lot of people in the area who, care a lot about that. But there might be the potential backlash from those folks who have already been to the media to complain about affordable housing going in their area, right? We've actually just had that happen recently as well, because there's affordable seniors housing going near Murphy Road, and the neighbors are all complaining about it. Not all the neighbors probably, but the ones who are vocal enough to have articles written about it. So you always have to look at it from the communications piece. So I'm communicating this. This is how some stakeholders are probably going to respond. This is the difficulty of communicating this. So this is the positive of the communication. This is the potential difficulty of the communication. So we're not necessarily looking at all of the other stuff. We're just looking at the communication piece. I know it's hard to shut your brain off for all of the other things. But for the purpose of today, we're just talking about the strategies around communication. Steph, did you have something else you wanted to say, or is your hand just still up?
No. So yeah, like if you're looking at it like a communications way, in order to correctly portray a pro or con that you are trying to push forward, finding that data and illustrating through numbers can sometimes speak volumes. Mm-hmm. But I also find, like, say that would be like the positive. So if you're trying to say we're going on the line of housing crisis, you could go on how many current people are out of homes and how much, and with that, how much it's a burden on current, say, funding or municipal funding that transfers to other services, and that if you just changed that funding towards creating more affordable housing, then it could potentially save money down the line. Now, as for a negative, the only problem I find too is sometimes people can get a lot of data, but not know how to look at it or correlate it in a way that will actually project the story or the relevance that you're trying to put forth.
Right. And what we've also learned in the last year and a half is that people can also find their own data to suit their own needs whenever they want at this point, which has been really challenging, for example, for public health for the last year. So that's something we're going to talk a little bit about in the messaging, which is step 7. We'll get there. So step 3 and 4. So determining your goal. And I mean, for something like this, your goal for your communications plan may just be to get elected or to gain a certain percentage of the vote, or to, increase my profile with this section of voters, that kind of thing. When you're doing a marketing plan or a communications plan for a particular product or something, it may be to increase sales by X number of dollars or things like that. So that is about getting creative. So you want to develop a strategy that's going to appeal to your to all your stakeholders. So this is where you're looking at something that's going to, so we're going to break down your different levels of publics, because it's rare you would just have one group of publics, right? Like one stakeholder group you're going to communicate with. So we essentially, this will have 3 components: your big idea strategy, which will also include, like, so that's kind of your big idea, your visual representation, what this campaign is going to look like, and then your slogan or hashtag, of course, because that's now how everything is done, right? And is in those quick little hashtags. And this is something that will be broad across the entire strategy, the entire sort of campaign, towards all publics. So you want to pick something that's kind of going to work universally across all of your stakeholders. And instead of me telling you all of these ideas, I have two actually really excellent videos that I came across. So it's not just me talking to everybody about everything. So hopefully the links work. Oh, because I'm going to have to stop my share because I can't present it this way. Now we've figured out the problem with this technology. I'm just going to stop sharing and we'll get to it. Now I have to share it this way. No, go to basic share. No, I have to, okay, it's gonna take a minute. One sec, I have to open PowerPoint the other way. I should have had this open in the background.
Marika, I made you
Oh, you muted yourself while you were talking. Somehow.
I made you co-host.
Okay.
So that you can share.
Okay, I'm just gonna scroll to the slide. I did not know I would not be able to link to presentations while I was doing this. Just kind of a bummer. Okay. Okay, now. Nope. Oh, I don't want to do that. Now it's not letting me share properly. One sec. There we go. Okay, now it's working. Okay, let's see if I can get it to work. Okay, so this one's on slogans, this video, and it's kind of a really great overview of some slogans, and then we're just going to do a quick debrief after we've watched this. And let me know if you can hear it. If you can't, we're going to have to figure that out.
We're not going to lose.
Political campaigns can feel, well, exhausting. The debates, TV ads,
Let's do this together.
rallies,
Senator Elizabeth Warren.
pundits.
What a showdown last night.
Politicians, the pollsters, the elite media.
And usually voters are only going to remember one thing about a candidate, their slogan.
We are going to make America great again.
A slogan is a word or a phrase used to express a position or goal. And when it comes to politics, it's that little soundbite that politicians want you to remember them by. They're chanted at rallies, the closing line in speeches, and they're printed on posters. Back in the day, they were even turned into original songs.
I've been on campaigns where oh my God, you spend hours and hours looking at polling data. You test things out in focus groups. I mean, a lot of science goes into this.
That's Dennis W. Johnson. He's a former political strategist and professor who's written a lot of books on election campaigns.
You know, if you're going to have an effective political slogan, it's got to be memorable. It's got to be catchy. It's got to be true. And it also should be aspirational. It should be a positive kind of message.
And that's what made Obama's 2008 campaign slogan so successful.
Kind of a rock star, Michael.
A star is born.
And the same goes for Trump's Make America Great Again slogan, even if it wasn't exactly original.
For those who've abandoned hope, we'll restore hope and we'll welcome them into a great national crusade to make America great again.
Political slogans have been around since at least the 1800s in the United States. William Henry Harrison was a war hero who went by his nickname Old Tippecanoe after a battle he won in 1811. When he ran for president in 1840 with John Tyler, his slogan was Tippecanoe and Tyler too. The race is seen as the first modern presidential campaign, complete with an advertising campaign that cast Harrison as a hardworking Western farmer who lived in a log cabin, despite the fact that he grew up wealthy on the East Coast. Since then, campaign slogans have become an essential part of any leadership race.
I think my absolute favorite has to be I Like Ike.
Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president, you like Ike.
I like Ike. Everybody likes Ike. For president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum. We'll take Ike to Washington.
It tells you nothing about what he stands for, but it basically says, I like this fella. I think he'd be a good president.
We'll take Ike to Washington.
Political campaigns are all about messaging, how well one candidate can define themselves and their vision for the country. And to do that, they tell you a story. Listen to what Bill Clinton's former campaign manager, James Carville, had to say about it.
Since the first time, the first human being told somebody about their parents, every story that ever exists has the same arc. It cannot have any other arc. It's called setup, conflict, resolution. And it is the way that people receive information. It's the only way they receive information. We don't get information through 10-point plans.
And when you look at some successful presidential campaigns, the narratives carefully crafted by political strategists almost always center around two emotions: fear or hope. Nixon weaponized fear to cast himself as a law and order candidate.
We shall have order in the United States. It's morning again in America.
Reagan was reelected after this historic ad convinced people he had turned the country around.
In an increasingly dangerous world.
George W. Bush used 9/11 to portray himself as America's protector. Obama championed a story of hope and change and progress.
We can choose hope over fear.
And Trump pulled a page from Nixon's playbook, ratcheting up white fear while offering a pseudo-nostalgic vision of old America. Of course, candidates don't get elected solely because of the story they tell. Campaigns take a small army to pull off, and there is a whole science dedicated to it. But research has shown that you can predict how someone will vote based on their perceptions of candidates' personalities, like how trustworthy they seem, or whether they'll make a good leader. Trump, for example, gets high ratings from Republicans on his personality traits, especially when it comes to his conviction. So why does this matter anyway? Well, the next time you go to a rally or watch a debate and a politician makes you feel some type of way, know that it's not an accident. It's by design.
So, you're 18 years old and you haven't registered to vote? What are you waiting for? A, take the opportunity to let those people.
It's like a weird Frank Zappa cameo at the end, which they said is weird because they got the question mark. I have one more video, which is about the visual components of the campaign, which is actually really interesting. So I recently did a communication plan for an organization that needed to communicate messaging specifically to older adults, like over 55, over 65. And I did research specifically on what colors they were more likely to engage with in a positive manner. And it was awesome. There are a lot of organizations, there's companies that have done research, actually app companies that have done research on that for apps that are geared towards elderly folks. So I was able to present my client with information that said, hey, these are the colors that this population, this stakeholder group is more likely to engage positively with, and these are the specific colors that they will not respond positively to. So colors and imagery actually have more to do, have actually like a lot more impact than you think they do. So a lot of care and thought should go into it. So this is actually kind of an interesting one, as a little interesting video as well. That speaks to that, because I always think it's good to have other people than me talking.
Students with ADHD save 10 hours.
We'll just have to ignore the ads.
Studying with the Scrum extension. But no, by all means, go ahead.
Is it full screen on your end? Or is it frozen on your end, the video?
Did you know that a 2012 Google study found that within 1/50th of a second, you will judge whether a website is good? And that is crazy. Imagine if you had to create an advertisement that grabs people's attention, tells a story, shows that you can relate to them, and convinces them to stand with you without saying a word. That is what a political campaign poster is supposed to do. Political posters are nothing more than propaganda art. Propaganda is simply the deliberate spreading of information and ideas to help a movement, institution, or nation. This idea goes way back to 192 AD in ancient Rome. Considering the scope and size of the Roman Empire, transmitting information was incredibly difficult. So how could you communicate with people on a daily basis who were often days away from the capital in Rome? What would people have on them all the time? That's right, money. As you might already know, the rulers of Rome seem to never be in short supply of self-esteem. So it comes as no surprise that Julius Caesar was the first to put his face on the Roman coin. Of course, designs were often made to give the emperor a more godlike image, since they loved to associate themselves with mythology. The greatest example just might be Emperor Commodus. In 192, he issues a series of coins to be made with his head adorned with a lion skin on top. I wonder if this might be like the first Halloween costume or something. Inscribed on the back was this, which means to the august Roman Hercules. Yeah, Commodus considered himself a descendant of Hercules. You know, just Hercules, nothing too big. Putting aside the crazy, this was an incredibly effective way to communicate a story to the masses, which was don't mess with Commodus. It's no surprise then that political posters adorn images of the candidates explaining their story to the masses, and often with a picture of them on it. Storytelling or narrative art is a powerful tool, but incredibly difficult to master. The first distributed poster was created for John Quincy Adams, who was the first presidential candidate to widely use posters in 1824. Check out this campaign poster for William McKinley in 1890. Simplicity is definitely not the goal here. Let's break down this image. McKinley at this time believed he could pull the country out of a depression by standing on a platform of sound money, which he called the gold standard. Businessmen and laborers hold up this massive gold coin, which definitely makes a statement. And of course, at the center of it all, you have McKinley holding the iconic American flag. My favorite is the sun rays in the background, which convey optimism. And by the way, yellow is psychologically the happiest color in the color spectrum. Not every candidate in the 1800s got this right. Check out this poster for William Jennings Bryan. Someone went a little overboard with this design. In fact, this poster has an entire speech of Bryan's on it. You need a magnifying glass to even read it. Combine this with the pictures, lots of colors, and you have a marketing nightmare. But I get it. Bryan had one chance to connect with people, so he decided to go with the more is better idea. But things were about to change, not just in political art, but in society as well. The political poster became less of a newspaper and more of an advertisement. Take a look at this William H. Taft poster in comparison to Bryan's. Taft's is definitely more imagery than text. From an artist's point of view, Taft is right in the middle of the focal point, with the red, white, and blue colors framing him perfectly. Then you have that personal touch of his signature. Most impressive is the tag tied to his jacket, which simply says, "Good times." This is a powerful, simple message referring to his campaign's goal of emphasizing the positives of Taft's platform. Oh, and check out the contrasting yellow color. You better believe that was intentional. Speaking of color, now that we are quickly moving into the age of advertising, everything in a design has a purpose, even color. And I love color theory. Let's simply look at the colors red, white, and blue. While using the flag colors may have been unintentional in the past, in the age of advertising, everything is intentional. Red is a very emotionally intense color. In fact, it can enhance your metabolism, increase your breathing rate, and raise your blood pressure. It's incredibly visible, which is why everything from stop signs to the McDonald's uses it. Most importantly, it's used to indicate courage. What do you think of when you see the color blue? Sky and water, right? It's often associated with depth and stability. It symbolizes trust, loyalty, wisdom, confidence, intelligence, and truth. It's even beneficial for your mind and body as it slows your metabolism and calms you. No wonder why many companies like these use this color in marketing products and services. White is associated with light, goodness, purity, and often perfection. More about color theory. Let's fast forward to 1960 when John F. Kennedy ran for president. This poster most definitely emphasized the youthfulness of JFK with the real photograph. And check out those clean, strong blocks of red, white, and blue. JFK's campaign was all about youth and vigor. The best word, I swear. Then in 1968, graphic designers got pretty creative with this Eugene McCarthy poster. He was outspoken about the Vietnam War, so this Picasso-ish pigeon, along with the continued use of high contrasting colors, definitely makes a powerful image. During the same year, however, Bobby Kennedy goes for something completely different with this cartoon caricature, swirling font, and bright colors. Purple often represents royalty and power, while green represents growth and harmony. The green in 68 definitely makes sense to me, but not so sure about the purple. Not sure if you knew this, but in 1972, Shirley Chisholm ran as the first Black woman for president. Chisholm had a simple yet powerful design, including her slogan, "Unbought and Unbossed," which you have to respect. Amazingly, she had 3 assassination attempts during her campaign, but still kept fighting. She is such an inspiration. Fast forward just a handful of years to 1984 and check out the imagery for Ronald Reagan. I find this poster so interesting. Apparently, the campaign decided to revert to 1800s designs with a lot more imagery, color, and certainly realism. In 2008, we saw one of the most powerful posters created. Whatever the cause may be, this campaign sparked something. The art community started creating some amazing imagery that we haven't seen before. You may not recognize some of these powerful posters and stickers, but I bet this one you do. Artist Shepard Fairey, also known as Obey Giant, created this now epic Obama campaign poster. A lot of controversy surrounds this image since Fairey used a photo taken by Manny Garcia without his permission. But things were settled, so let's focus on the art, shall we? Believe it or not, Fairey designed and printed this poster in one day. Crazy, right? He also did this without the Obama campaign even knowing about it. Although not only did Obama approve and use this image, but he also wrote Fairey a letter thanking him. Check it out. In this image, we see a mixture of realism and cartoon within the face. And keep in mind, this was created with multiple stencils. Instead of simply using the red, white, and blue in the background or in the front, Fairey used the colors throughout the entire artwork. Not only that, he uses some incredible contrast to move your eye from one area to the next. For example, check out the white shirt and collar, which act as a pointer to the upper right red area. Then, the red of the tie brings my eye back to the word hope. Notice that white was not used in the font, which you would have imagined. This allowed the color white to act as that primary focal point. Hope reads in bold, simple, clean letters. It's amazing to me how one word can summarize an entire campaign. Definitely reminds me that less can often mean more. Even though we just scratched the surface of the many political art designs, hopefully this will give you a greater appreciation for what goes into great graphic design and the power of narrative art in political campaigns. Until next time, be sure to get out there and vote and be outrageous.
All right, some food for thought. And that's actually what I wanted to chat about next. I wanted to kind of unpack some slogans. Let me just see if I can actually share this. I want to type in and see if anyone can think of political slogans. And if you think it hit the mark on that memorable, catchy, true, aspirational that they mentioned in that first video. Do you remember any political slogans? Is the first question, I guess.
Like local?
It doesn't have to be local, like even just like big campaigns or anything like that.
I'm trying to think of ones that you didn't say, because that "Make America Great Again" is just like garbage in my ears usually.
Right. Well, we can talk it here. I'll add that one in because that's actually a good one. Do you remember what Hillary Clinton's was during that same campaign? No.
Is it sad to say no?
It's not. And so that's.
Did it have something to do with breaking the glass ceiling?
It did. Good one. So it was, I'm with her. So if you look at the two of those, which one of those actually like tells, which one of those A is more memorable, and which one of those actually tells you more about it, right? Like which one appeals to a broader base, or appeals to their specific base, right? If you look at what Trump was trying to do, look at what Hillary Clinton was trying to do, like I'm with her is a little bit more polarizing and probably a little bit less informative. Like if you, not that I like Trump, certainly, like we're not talking about who I would have voted for in that election. But if you think of Make America Great Again, right? He's hearkening back to these old times, and everyone remembers like, oh, the 50s were great when America was at its, superpower, we were the strongest, we want to be that again. People remember that and they can think back to that, and that inspires them. That's aspirational to them. I'm with her is basically just saying, vote for me because I'll be the first woman president. It's not giving you information in the slogan anyway, right? Like her platform probably did, but as they said in that video, people aren't paying attention to 10-point platforms. They're paying attention to slogans. And I'm with her is not giving them, it's not giving them any of that, right? Do any of you have any thoughts about the difference between those two, or why people may have responded more to the first one than the second one?
I would say the Make America Great Again to me is action word, which is involving me. It almost sounds like we're all working together to make America great again.
Right. I think that's a really good point. Stephanie, you've got your hand up. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know. I don't have data to back this, but I'm just curious that the demographic that votes more are more like, say, white male. And so that there's some kind of morals, or I shouldn't say morals, but their beliefs of that particular demographic appealed to that sentence, I would assume. But
I would probably agree with that. I mean, I also don't have data to back it up, but I think in general, we tend to know that older white folks get out and vote, especially we know, at least municipally, we do have that data. We know that the older folks are the ones who get out and vote. So I would say that yes, that's the case. And in the video, they said appeal to that like white fear and those kind of things. So that slogan tells them, first he's saying, be afraid of all of these terrible things happening. Oh, and look what I can do for you. Look what we're going to do together. So it made them afraid, and then also appealed to the things that used to make them safe and happy, which is actually, I mean, I'm not going to say it's genius. I would never say that, but it is a very good communication tactic. I'll put it that way. Ronnie.
Of JFK's words, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, which again, that same kind of slogan feel, but it's also a call to action. Yeah. Like whenever I do a website, always like in the Facebook, Instagram marketing thing, it's always like, make sure you have your call to action. Make sure you know what you're asking of your population and what you're getting. Yeah. What's the whole point of this message? So that's the difference also with the MAGA versus what Hillary put out.
Yeah, and I think the other point that I actually didn't know until I watched that video was that Reagan was the first one to say "Make America," like we're going to make America great again in his speech, and folks loved Reagan. And actually, Trump spoke a lot about wanting, like aspiring to be like Reagan. Like he mentioned many times in his presidency or in his run for the presidency that that's who he looked up to as a president, like in terms of his run and who he wanted to kind of be a president like was Reagan. People really, really liked Reagan, right? And so taking one of his quotes and making it his slogan was also a really good communication tactic as well. But again, I'm with her. I mean, it appeals to us feminists. It appeals to those diehard Democrats who were like, yes, we love the Clintons. We love Hillary. We want the first woman president. But it doesn't really appeal outside of that slogan. Like it doesn't really appeal to anyone outside of that bubble, just on its face, right? So it's really interesting when you just unpack those two, which is really interesting as well. The other one I'll bring up just locally, if we're talking about the last federal election, and the signs kind of drove me crazy, but people paid attention to them, and it sparked, and I actually don't know that this was just a local idea, because it may have been wider spread, but at least halfway through the most recent federal election, the local PPC folks had signs out that said, because the other guys suck. And I mean, that's something, and you're like, well, that doesn't seem very professional, or that's kind of dumb. But a lot of people were expressing frustration very loudly about traditional political parties, right? And so they're appealing to those folks who are very unhappy with the traditional political kind of game, the traditional politics. They're unhappy with all of these things, and they're appealing to that. It doesn't give you that action word, it doesn't give you any of that, but they're appealing to that sentiment of there really are no good candidates this year, right? Because the other guys suck, right? Which I found really interesting. And those signs didn't come out right away. They came out later on during, or at least they did in my neighborhood. It could have been something planned earlier on, but I thought those signs were interesting to me as a communication tactic, because they certainly made people take they made people turn around and pay attention, right? So yeah, I'm going to try and share the other way again so we can chat. Let's see if we can make it work this time. Okay. Okay, just take me a minute. Okay. Oh, it's saying it's in use because I still have it open. Okay, I have to close that. Okay. It's preparing my PowerPoint. There we go. I just have to go through where were we at. Oh, look, now our new stuff is there. Okay, so step 7, time to plan. So this is when we're actually going to get the meat and potatoes of our messages together. So this is the stuff I love, because messaging is kind of that's my business. I'm in the business of messaging, so I love this. So you're going to develop primary and secondary messages for each of your stakeholder groups. So for each of your publics. So your primary messages should be more sort of short and succinct, more like sound bites, things that are easy for people to kind of catch on to and remember. They should be tied to the stakeholder group's self-interests and include an action. So like you had said, Ronnie, you want it to include that action that you want them to take. So whether it be the other guys suck, vote for me, or something like that, you want it to have that action. Secondary messages are kind of what Stephanie mentioned before when we were talking about some of the data. So those are going to back up your primary messages with facts and information. Like you're going to have data in there. You can include some testimonials, examples, stories, anything that'll back up your primary messages. But you don't want them to be too lengthy. You still want them to be relatively succinct, maybe just a sentence or two. And I mean, testimonials, stories, those kind of things are more for a traditional sort of communication marketing plan, but you could use those as well in a political communication plan. If you're thinking in terms of, say, if we go back to the homelessness piece or the affordable housing piece, you could have somebody that you've maybe communicated with as part of your campaign who is on your side about it, who's been personally impacted by the lack of affordable housing, share their story as part of the secondary message, if that makes sense. Like that would be a way to do it in a political campaign message in that way. So one example that I've given before, and I could, just because I have the data off the top of my head, in Sarnia-Lambton, we're kind of unique in that we have half of the people in Sarnia make under $50,000 a year, but a quarter of the people in Sarnia-Lambton make over $250,000 a year, or something like that, around that. And then a quarter of people in Sarnia-Lambton live under the poverty line. So like we have this massive wealth disparity. So those are the kind of data, that's the kind of data that you could use to back up primary messages, things like that. And then next in the plans, you're also going to determine which tactics and channels to use for each of the groups. So are you going to use print? Are you going to use posters? Are you going to use lawn signs? Are you going to use social media? And if you are going to use social media, which channels are you going to use for social media? How do you plan to use those channels, those kind of things. So again, that's all very important. Certainly we'll talk about other things in the next stage. So I want to ask you guys, what particular tactics and channels are you familiar with? Which ones are you not familiar with? Which ones do you think are great? Which ones do you absolutely hate? Are there ones that you absolutely hate? I certainly have ones that I absolutely hate.
I hate lawn signs.
Collecting lawn signs to comply with municipal rules at the end is certainly not fun.
Exactly.
Because it's a big undertaking, because right after the election, you have to rush out and get them all very quickly. But it's a great way for name recognition, right? People see your name all over the place if you have signs out. So
I like the direct mailing, whether that's just a postcard or whatever that is, so that you can get the information right in your hand and it goes to everyone. And I find it effective because I'll read it if it's in my hand.
Yeah. Direct mailing can be expensive, right? Like, so that's a budgetary consideration. That it can be pricey for sure. Yeah. Right.
I'm a social media girl. I like to be on video. I like to talk to the audience, and I relate to people. I mean, I think one of the reasons I became such a follower of Brian White was because of how transparent and open he is on social media. I also follow Nathan, counsel again. He brings the issues forward, and so I think it's a much better way to relate to the audience and get people to know who you are. Adam Kilner's another one. If I passed a street sign, I probably wouldn't even give him a second thought, but because I seen him so relevant on my Facebook scroll, I got to know him, follow him, and then started to really identify the issues that he was fighting for.
Right. Okay. So step 8. So there are obviously, like, if we were looking at this in super fine detail, there are other steps to include, but step 8 is really just organizing and executing, carrying it out. So calendarizing your rollout. So that's really important. Just putting together an Excel spreadsheet that says what you're planning to do when. Certainly. So in the last federal election campaign, Stephanie and I were both actively involved in that. Stephanie as a candidate, me as a jack of all trades for one of the candidates. It was a massive undertaking because we only had 4 weeks, basically 4 weeks to get it done from start to finish. So you just kind of sit down, say what you're planning to do when, get it all organized, who's going to do what, put your budget in there, all of that kind of stuff. That really helps you organize it all. Put in a system of checks and balances. This is really important. So that's just like develop a little sheet, like a little, checklist of, who's going to write it. Have they written it? Make sure there's a second set of eyes on it before it goes out. So, if you're writing an ad for the radio, if you're writing a social media copy, get a second set of eyes on it. Like, has it gone through that system of checks and balances, that kind of stuff. You can kind of develop that checklist just to have that, make sure, you've got that in place. Determine who's responsible for what, very important. If you have the opportunity to have a great team of volunteers, it's amazing to make sure you've got people with set responsibilities so that everybody kind of knows what they're doing. Very helpful. Tie it to the budget if you can, so that you've got everything kind of figured out and organized ahead of time, so it's no hidden costs, you're not surprised by anything. And then 5, so I know we talked about social media and online channels. Monitor. Like, I cannot stress that enough, especially Stephanie and I know this well from the last campaign. It's nasty, and it can get nasty really fast. I was monitoring social media from the time I woke up in the morning and from the time I went to sleep every night for 3.5 weeks once we started paid ads. It was horrible. It was awful. But hiding comments, deleting comments, blocking people. You cannot have online social media channels for a campaign if you are not prepared to almost like go through 24/7 monitoring. And I know that sounds horrible, but that's kind of the world we're in. I mean, I ran the pages for a racialized candidate. It was not a pretty place behind the scenes. It was not. So it's just something that you have to do. We don't block people because we believe that everyone should have a voice. I know there's a lot of candidates who will just block people because they don't think anything against their particular stance should ever be shared on social media. That's not our position. That's never my position, because I think a good, healthy discussion about why we have difference of opinions is a good thing. But if it crosses the line into offensive or inappropriate or hateful, you're gone. And hate speech is not protected speech. It's absolutely not protected speech. So once you have that kind of, your limits, you just have to be on it. Monitoring is very important. Don't feel like you have to leave up those comments very much. So Helen has a quick question just about if I could explain the system of checks and balances. And that's just to put in a checklist to make sure that you've had more than one set of eyes on everything before it goes out to the public, to make sure that everything's spelled correctly, it's grammatically correct, everyone on the team is okay with the message, it's reading correctly, because you want to make sure if you're putting together a message, it's landing the way you want it to sound in your head. Because I even sometimes, like, I'm francophone, I'm bilingual, sometimes I think things, I say them out loud, they sound okay to me, they don't always sound okay to everybody else. So it's important that I have someone I can bounce things off of. So it's important to kind of have somebody that can go through that questionnaire. If you're developing communications, if you're the person on the team who's going to do that you have somebody else on the team who can go through that checklist before it goes out. So that it's, everybody on board is cool with it. And there's a really cool online program called Grammarly that you can get, and there is a free option, and it is a really cool tool that helps with not just spell check, but also grammar checks. And it works behind the scenes on most online platforms. So even when you're on Instagram or Facebook, it will check your grammar for you. It's very helpful. I highly recommend downloading it. Good job, Steph. Steph's kids use it. I love it. Ronnie, you have a question?
I have a comment to illustrate the importance of what you're just saying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a forager. It's my hobby. I like to make medicine. I like to learn about botany and plants. One of the things I like to forage regularly is mushrooms. So it's a hobby. And so your Facebook and Instagram are connected. And so I recently shared one of my mushroom posts, and it says, I can be brown, I can be blue, I can be violet in the sky, I can be hurtful, I can be purple, I can be anything that you like. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll share that to Instagram. Well, it turns out it went to the Couples Clinic site on the Couple Clinic Instagram. And it turns out, because my kids let me know this, that the bottom one was actually magic mushrooms. And I'm like, so 98 people viewed that on my Couples Clinic.
On your business page, right.
So yeah, it just demonstrates the real importance of double checking and getting that second eyes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I have definitely shared stuff with just typos in it. My new phone typos my name because it hasn't learned the spelling of my name yet. So like everything I put out typos. My new phone, and I don't know why, it's still like an Android, but it's not a Samsung anymore. It will autocorrect correct words into different correct words. So like I will try to write sell and it'll change it to smell. Like, so sometimes I put out a post that I think is correct because I've done it and it was correct when I typed it, but it's changed it to words that are just different correct words that no longer make any sense. And then I've shared it and I'll get a message saying like, excuse me, this is not correct. And like, it was correct when I wrote it. And then my phone changed it all. And so I'll give you an example actually of checks and balances. I put out a post for the candidate during the federal election about how universities, campuses weren't going to have election polling stations on campus. So, hey, you're probably shopping at Walmart anyways for back to school stuff. Pop into the Election Canada office. It's right there in the parking lot buildings. You know, we know you're already at the parking lot anyways. Pop in there. And I got some feedback saying like, people are trying to shop local. They're not shopping at Walmart. Well, that actually isn't true. There's a lot of low-income folks that still very much shop at Walmart. So I knew that that was actually an appropriate post, but I had someone who is, you know, is a diehard local shopper, which is great, say that post is an inappropriate post for me to put out. And I was like, actually, by telling me that, you are excluding a significant portion of our population who only shop at Walmart because they can't afford to shop locally or anywhere else, right? So it's interesting, like some people also have difference of opinion, so you have to kind of think that through as well. But yeah, I joked, I was very, because this person was the grammar police, so I very clearly said, like, you are more than welcome to take over social media for this campaign if you want. I would be happy to hand it over because there are other things I'm doing, but it's very important to have more than one set of eyes on every single thing that comes out. So that kind of ends our section on communication strategy and planning. I said that would be the bulk. We're going to move into media relations. It's going to be brief because I know there might be questions and stuff. So does anyone have any burning questions before we hop to media relations really quickly? No? Okay. So media relations, and this is just kind of a brief overview of things I've learned doing media relations, things I've been shared with from journalists, and things just I've learned from candidates. So let's just talk about what worries you. Do you guys have anything that kind of freaks you out about having to talk to the media? Ronnie, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah. I tackle my me going forward and speaking to the public and somehow getting twisted and having my business attacked. That's a concern, right? Like probably my number one out of everything that I'm concerned of. That is it. Only I've seen and I've heard of other things and other candidates and how that's been used against them.
Right. Yeah. Any other worries? I know for me, a worry, and I mean, I do public relations now, so it's something that I'm so mindful of every time I speak anywhere. And I do a lot of public presentations now, this being one of them, but I have a really bad habit of putting my foot in my mouth. I say things all of the time that in my head sound normal and totally acceptable and fine, but when they come out of my mouth, I very quickly realize they don't sound normal and acceptable and fine. And that's not great. So it's something that I'm trying to be more mindful of, and I know I need to be more mindful of, which is why I used to always be really, like, Ronnie knows this, I'm a very fast talker. I'm a much slower talker than I used to be. It's cultural. Francophone people are very fast talkers. It's just how we are. It's just people. But like I've been very mindful to slow myself down. And I also used to just think I had to answer like this all of the time because it was the smart thing to do. I pause so much more now before I answer, because I just I don't care if I sound dumb by taking a long pause. Like, I'm going to take a long pause before I answer, so I don't put my foot in my mouth. Steph, do you have any worries or just thoughts? You turned your camera on, so I wonder.
I just turned on my camera because I've stopped being super mom and finished dinner and groceries while doing this. So I just can sit down. But worries. I think the first worry I had before, which is not so much, I guess, was basically what would be coming back to my kids.
Right.
Because being out in the public, sometimes people's perceptions or comments can go back to your family, and depending on how young they are or susceptible they are to comments about you could be a problem. But
yeah, I think that's a fair worry. Absolutely. You have to kind of prepare your whole family when you become like a very public person. Absolutely. So let's talk about some do's and don'ts. And this is kind of my last slide, so we can just chat openly for the next little bit, but I do have a video if we want to watch a video, but so get some help developing a bio. It's very hard to talk about yourself. I know that and I don't know, Ronnie, if you had the same experience, but I worked in a job where you really didn't share personal information. It certainly didn't have a public sort of persona. And I worked in that place for 15 years. So it became really hard for me to talk about myself. My dad's also Eastern European, and it's like, you don't self-promote. Like it's cultural that it's humility is cultural. Like it makes me physically uncomfortable. It makes him physically, like, it's just weird when people tell me I look like, it's weird. It's a physical discomfort. So having others help you write your bios, develop your bios is actually very helpful, because sometimes other people getting that kind of outside help, crafting that will make it, we'll just make it sound better, but they'll pick out things about you that you wouldn't necessarily pick out about yourself to share with the public, which I think is really good. So I do recommend getting help developing your bio. Get really comfortable talking yourself up, which is something a lot of people need help getting comfortable with. It's hard, like even when Helen's reading my bio, like it just makes me, it's weird. It just makes me uncomfortable, but you have to get used to that. You have to be comfortable talking about yourself all of the time, because that's what the public needs to hear. They need to know why they're voting for you. So you have to tell them why all of the time, and talking about yourself is a big part of that. So the next do is be human. So I always joke about this, but I mean, if you look at like old elections in the past, you know, you saw these kind of stiff, usually old dudes in their like very like starch suits standing up there, like very proper, and they were very like robotic, and all of their statements were very prepared. And that's not really what people connect with anymore. People are looking to connect with you on a values base. They're looking to connect with you because you're a human being, and they want to see themselves reflected in you, and they are more likely to vote for you because of that, right? And actually, it's a tactic that worked for me well when I was working in social work, right? Like once I became a human being to the people I was working with, and they saw that, yes, I also sometimes had a kid barf all over me at home because I know what it's like, or yes, I like, you know, drive a crappy car that has garbage all over it. Like it makes you human, and they realize you're not this like scary, stiff robot person. You're more likely to connect on a different level and build a more meaningful relationship with those people, right? So do be human. Don't be afraid to be that way. And then practice. So when you're talking to the media, you want to practice answering questions. So if you have someone on your team, or even just in your family, who can ask you questions, even if they're kind of off the cuff, just like you're making dinner or you're sitting at the dinner table and they ask you questions, just to help you getting comfortable asking questions unprepared. And then also practice bridging topics. So bridging is when you're asked a question, but you'd rather answer a different question, or you're being asked a question that's really not convenient, or it doesn't really relate to anything you're there to talk about, right? So you'd rather just talk about something that's kind of related to that question, but is really more about your platform. So that's what bridging is. You're bridging from one topic to the other, and then you're actually talking about the thing you want to talk about. So Obama is actually a genius at that. But practice bridging topics and try to make it really seamless, and not super obvious, because sometimes when it's really obvious, it's very annoying, but that's always something helpful to practice. And don't. So this is something, and actually this is something that locally the media, I mean, any media person really doesn't like, but locally I know a lot of people don't like it. Don't ask the media for questions ahead of time. That's not something people like to be asked. A lot of media will actually provide questions if they want to, which is great. And then you can write answers and send them back. And then if you've written answers and sent them back, they'll print them as they were written. So also make sure that somebody else reads over your answers. Again, put that checks and balances in place as you would for a regular communications plan. But don't expect them to give you those questions ahead of time. That's not something they would do. Like if a media is calling you for a media person is calling you for an interview, the expectation is that they're calling you for an interview. They're not going to provide you everything ahead of time. I do find my experience has been, if it's a debate, they'll usually let you know the topics ahead of time, at least locally, right? They'll say, oh, we're going to talk about housing, we're going to talk about evictions, we're going to talk about the budget, that kind of thing. But they won't let you know the questions. Another don't is don't ask or demand to read the story or the article ahead of time. And if they do let you read the story or article ahead of time, don't expect that if you request changes that they will make those changes. They are journalists and it's their job to report them as they want to report it. So that's something else to keep in the back of your mind as well. And then just also steer clear of going off the record, because nothing is really off the record ever. So just stay away from it entirely. So those are my sort of tips. Rose, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, just a comment. When I was working with public health and I would be phoned by the media, when I first started there, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to answer this right now and have all the answers right in front of me. But as you develop relationships with the media people, it's fine if they call you to ask you questions and it's not a good time for you.
Yeah.
I found it was okay to say, you know what, I'm doing this right now, but I can get back to you and give them a time frame. And it was always fine.
Yeah.
And
you're busy.
Yeah. And I always appreciated like building those relationships. Sometimes I would talk and think, oh my gosh, what did I just say? But they always would make you appear smarter than I felt at that moment. So when the article came out, it was always well done. So I think we need to relax a little bit. And when we're answering the questions, or if it's not a good time for you, just make a call back.
Yeah. And another tip that I would also suggest, don't use your personal email for media relations during a campaign either. And my reasoning behind that is because you get like 100 million marketing emails a day. I know I have my email subscribed to like 8 million websites I bought from over the years, and stuff gets lost. Just make like a, Marika campaign@gmail.com or something, and give that out to media folks, just so that you have like a dedicated email. You're not going to miss anything. That's like a pro tip, is that just do that, because otherwise stuff will get lost. I lose emails all the time. So that comes from experience, that tip. And you can ask, I would also say too, you can ask the media folks like, hey, could you send me a link to the article? Could you make sure you send me a link? Like if you're being interviewed on the radio, can you make sure you send me a link to, like if they're sharing it online, like, can you let me know what time it's going to be on, or can you send me a link to it? Because that way you can share it on your platforms as well. Yeah.
That last tip is a good one, because I didn't think about that.
Well, and it's funny because you would hope that they would tag your campaign page or your own personal page when they're posting things, but they don't always think to do that. So just as an extra request, just ask them to send you a link, or to tag you specifically online if they're going to be posting it online. And another just tip is like, don't say anything to media people you wouldn't say like in a public forum, because essentially anything you say to the media is a public forum. It may seem like you're having a personal conversation with someone, but you're talking to the entire community, right? So it's just something to be mindful of. Any other thoughts or questions? We went through a lot of stuff. And I do have one more video, but we would go way over probably if I shared it. This is, and I can just like send out the link, but it's a really good interview. And I mean, if you really want to see any good interviews with people or good speeches with people, I highly recommend watching literally just any of Barack and Michelle Obama's interviews and speeches, because they are great orators. They're great speakers. And they're so good at sounding so put together and well practiced, but also human. They're very good at doing both of those things. But this interview was fantastic because this is when he was still a senator, before he had not announced that he was going to run. But it was after his big DNC speech in 2004 when everyone was like, oh, he's totally setting up to run. And it was just him being interviewed by Conan in Chicago. And it was super personable. And it was about his family and his community. And it was just a great example of just being superhuman, just being a human being, right? Like being a very personable, affable politician who is presenting as a human. And I know that sounds so weird to say, but like a lot of politicians are so overly practiced and manufactured, and like, you know, the fake smile and the hello, like it's just, people don't respond to that the same way they do to people like Barack, who are just like so personable that like you just want to vote for them because you can see how they're super smart, but also like these just genuinely like human being people that you could see being your next door neighbor. So we could watch that if people want to watch that for the next couple of minutes, or we could not. It's up to you guys. Or just Google Barack's Conan interview from 2004.
Does the group want to watch it now, or would you like to look for it on your own? Stephanie says yes.
I'm going to stop the share because I have to go in it the other way.
You can, we have one. Ronnie, you're good to look for it on your own. Laura, you're good to look for it on your own. Rose? Can't hear you, Rose. You're muted.
I'm fine to look on my own, Helen.
Okay. So
I can send you the link.
If you send me the link, Marika, I can send it out. Okay.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much for attending tonight. That was a huge amount of really great information that you passed on, Marika. And I'm sure that people can find you if they need help with their bio or any of that kind of stuff, or more tips and tricks. So I thank all of you for attending tonight. I wish you happy holidays and hope that I see you in the new year. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Marika.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Did a great job.
Thank you.